Have you ever wondered what happens when the biggest boy band on the planet collides with the absolute titans of the Western music industry? We all know BTS shattered global records, but what does it genuinely take to earn the deep, undeniable respect of true American music legends? Is it just about crazy Billboard numbers, or is there a rare hidden magic these iconic veterans see in the boys from Seoul? How do you even measure that kind of historic, undisputed validation from the biggest names in the game? Are you ready to uncover the ultimate proof without any filters and find out who truly impressed who? Buckle up and prepare to be amazed, because this is the top 7 signs BTS member has earned recognition from American music legends.
Number 7. RM, the mastermind's validation, when the neo-soul queen broke her silence. Imagine standing in the shadows of the underground Korean hip-hop scene back in 2013, a teenage boy with big dreams and an explosive flow, constantly fighting the brutal stigma that idol rappers could never be taken seriously by the true puritans of the genre, only to fast forward a decade later and find yourself sitting across from the absolute architects of modern American music, who aren't just looking at your streaming numbers, but are actively treating you as an intellectual peer. That is the jaw-dropping reality of Kim Namjoon, known globally as RM, the visionary leader of BTS, whose journey into the highest echelons of Western musical respect reached a historic pinnacle during the creation of his solo masterpiece album, Indigo, a project that served as the ultimate canvas for a blown-mind cosign that left the entire industry completely speechless. When we talk about American music legends, few names carry the untouchable, mystical weight of Erykah Badu, the undisputed queen of neo-soul. A 4-time Grammy winner known for her uncompromising artistic integrity, her notoriously selective circle, and a legendary career built on pushing boundaries without ever selling out her sonic soul. For decades, Erykah Badu has been a gatekeeper of pure, unadulterated musical poetry, someone who rarely grants collaborations unless there is a profound, spiritual connection to the music, making her the ultimate litmus test for any artist seeking genuine artistic validation in the West. Yet when RM reached out to her for the opening track of his album, a deeply philosophical song titled Yoon that pays homage to the late Korean abstract painter Yoon Hyung-kun, something magical happened, because Badu didn't just listen to the track, she felt the heavy, existential weight of Namjoon's lyricism and recognized a kindred spirit across the ocean. The narrative behind this legendary recognition is thick with atmospheric tension and mutual reverence, beginning when RM, acting not as a global pop star backed by a massive corporate machine, but as a humble student of art, center the track along with a deeply personal explanation of the song's core message, which explores the painful, beautiful struggle of trying to preserve one's humanity before creating art. To the shock of music critics worldwide who assumed the Western indie and soul elite would always look down on K-pop artists, Erykah Badu didn't just accept the invitation, she delivered a hauntingly beautiful spoken word and vocal performance that anchored the entire theme of the album, publicly declaring that RM's frequency matched her own and praising his deep understanding of rhythm, life, and artistic purpose. But the validation didn't stop with the soul community, because around that exact same historic era, another absolute titan of American music, the multi-Grammy-winning super producer and cultural icon Pharrell Williams, explicitly sought out RM for a historic face-to-face dialogue hosted by Rolling Stone magazine, a meeting that quickly shifted from a standard interview into a profound masterclass of mutual respect, where Pharrell openly treated RM as a songwriting equal. During this legendary interaction, Pharrell, who has shaped the soundscapes of everyone from Jay-Z and Snoop Dogg to Daft Punk, was visibly captivated by RM's maturity, his heavy burden of leading a global phenomenon, and his brilliant philosophy on music production, leading Pharrell to publicly offer RM a spot on his own highly anticipated Friends project On the Spot, a gesture of artistic inclusion that money simply cannot buy. This isn't just about a commercial feature or a trendy social media shout-out. This is the rarest form of industry recognition, where American legends who have spent 30 years defining global music culture look past the screaming stadium crowds, look past the shiny choreography, and look directly into the eyes of a young Korean man to say that his pen game, his production instincts, and his artistic soul are undeniably elite. For a boy who started his journey dissecting American hip-hop albums in a small room in Ilsan, translating lyrics line by line just to understand the soul of the craft, receiving this level of unprompted, deep creative validation from the very pioneers he grew up studying is the ultimate full-circle moment that proves BTS has transcended the temporary bubble of pop stardom. It forces the global music community to reflect on how a Korean lyricist managed to bridge the immense cultural divide so perfectly that the gatekeepers of Black American music traditions felt compelled to welcome him into their artistic sanctuary with open arms, leaving fans and skeptics alike watching in absolute awe as RM permanently cemented his legacy, not just as an idol group leader, but as a universally respected contemporary artist whose voice resonates powerfully with the greatest musical minds of our generation.
Number 6. J-Hope, the hip-hop titan's blessing. When a childhood idol became a lyrical brother. To truly comprehend the sheer gravity of what it means for a South Korean street dancer to penetrate the fiercely protective, deeply rooted sanctuary of American hip-hop culture, you have to look past the glitz of pop music and peer straight into the raw, uncompromising world of North Carolina rap royalty. For Jung Hoseok, known to millions of roaring fans across the globe as J-Hope, the journey of musical evolution began not in a high-tech corporate studio, but on the concrete floors of underground dance battles in Gwangju, where he would move his body to the rhythm of classic American hip-hop beats, daydreaming about a distant world he only knew through old music videos and pirated audio tracks. Among the constellation of Western rap gods who shaped his artistic DNA, one particular name stood as an unreachable, towering monument of lyrical genius and pure street authenticity: J. Cole. A multi-platinum, Grammy-winning titan, the mastermind behind Cole World and Born Center, and a man universally revered as one of the absolute gatekeepers of modern hip-hop storytelling who famously values artistic substance over commercial gimmicks. For over a decade, J-Hope openly worshipped Cole's discography, even subtly paying homage to his idol by naming his own debut solo mixtape, Hope World, as a direct nod to the sonic landscape that had saved him during his darkest trainee days. Never in a million years imagining this deeply personal, one-sided admiration would eventually transform into a historic, jaw-dropping creative partnership that shook the foundations of the global music industry. The unbelievable turning point in this legendary narrative of validation unfolded in the summer of 2022, when J-Hope made history as the first ever South Korean artist to headline the main stage of a major American music festival at Lollapalooza in Chicago, delivering a tour de force performance that caught the attention of the entire Western music elite, including J. Cole himself, who happened to be headlining the festival on a separate night. The cinematic atmosphere of their initial backstage meeting was thick with raw emotion, as a visibly nervous J-Hope poured his heart out to his lifelong hero, only to be met not with the polite, distant pleasantries of a typical Western star, but with the warm, deeply respectful embrace of an icon who had actively watched J-Hope's historic performance and was genuinely blown away by his explosive stage presence, his impeccable rhythm, and his unyielding dedication to the hip-hop craft. But what happened next transcended the boundaries of a simple festival link-up, evolving into the ultimate validation when J-Hope, right before entering his mandatory military service in 2023, reached out to the Dreamville Records founder for a farewell single titled On the Street, a track designed to look back on his 20-year journey from the streets of Gwangju to the top of the world. In a move that left hardcore American hip-hop purists utterly stunned, J. Cole didn't just casually phone in a lazy 4-bar commercial verse for a quick paycheck. Instead, he treated the collaboration with the absolute highest level of artistic seriousness, delivering a deeply philosophical, incredibly intricate, and lengthy verse that ranks among some of his most profound lyrical work of the entire decade. Openly contemplating his own musical mortality, his legacy, and the passing of the torch to a younger generation of global creators. The music video itself served as a visual masterpiece of undisputed recognition, showing J. Cole standing high on a rooftop against the iconic New York City skyline.
pouring his soul into a microphone while J-Hope danced through the gritty alleyways below, creating a powerful, symbolic bridge between the birthplace of hip-hop and the South Korean artist who had inherited its true spirit. By publicly calling J-Hope his brother, praising his artistic vision on a global platform, and granting him a collaboration that legendary Western rappers spend their entire careers begging for, J. Cole single-handedly demolished the outdated, arrogant narrative that international pop idols lack hip-hop credibility, sending a definitive, thunderous message to the global music community that J-Hope's rhythm, his passion, and his artistic soul are recognized and validated by the very pioneers who built the culture from scratch, leaving an unforgettable, inspiring legacy that will forever challenge how the world defines the global reach of authentic street artistry.
Number 5. Jin, the Stadium Rock legend's guitar, when Coldplay handed over their sacred torch. To truly grasp the cinematic grandeur of Kim Seok-jin's journey into the hearts of rock royalty, you have to picture a young man who was originally scouted on the streets of Seoul for his striking actor-like visuals, thrown into a high-pressure idol training system, and constantly forced to fight the unfair perception that he was just a pretty face in a hyper-synchronized pop group. For years, Jin quietly and meticulously forged his own vocal identity, developing a soaring, emotionally piercing silver voice that could pierce through the roaring chaos of sold-out stadium crowds, all while harboring a deep, lifelong admiration for the iconic British-American stadium rock band Coldplay, led by the enigmatic and fiercely protective Chris Martin. For over 2 decades, Coldplay has defined the global landscape of alternative rock, selling out historic arenas, winning 7 Grammy Awards, and maintaining a notoriously guarded artistic circle where they rarely share their creative universe with outsiders, let alone pop acts from across the globe. Yet, when the paths of these two musical forces crossed during the historic creation of the collaborative anthem My Universe, an unbelievable, soul-stirring bond was forged that completely shattered the rigid boundaries between the Western rock establishment and the Eastern pop phenomenon. Chris Martin didn't just view BTS as a trendy cultural wave to ride. He saw within them, and particularly within Jin's gentle yet fiercely passionate dedication, a rare, pure love for the unifying power of music that mirrored his own early days in the industry. The ultimate, jaw-dropping moment of validation that left the global music community utterly breathless occurred when Chris Martin traveled to South Korea and during a private, deeply intimate interaction in their studio, looked directly into Jin's eyes and handed him his absolute favorite acoustic guitar, the very instrument Martin had played for years on legendary global stages, signing it with Jin's nickname and officially gifting it to him as a profound token of artistic brotherhood. This wasn't a corporate PR stunt or a casual backstage pleasantry. It was a sacred, symbolic passing of the torch from a legendary rock pioneer to a Korean vocalist, a gesture so deeply moving that Jin later admitted he kept the guitar as a priceless family heirloom, terrified to even touch it out of sheer reverence. But the fairy tale narrative of historic recognition reached its absolute emotional peak in October 2022, right before Jin was set to courageously halt his skyrocketing career to fulfill his mandatory military enlistment in South Korea. Desiring to leave a beautiful, comforting farewell gift for his millions of fans, Jin collaborated with Chris Martin and the rest of Coldplay to co-write his debut solo single, The Astronaut, a sweeping, atmospheric indie rock masterpiece that perfectly captured Jin's celestial vocal range. Instead of just sending the track over an email link, Chris Martin did something unprecedented for a Western legend of his stature. He personally invited Jin to fly halfway across the world to Buenos Aires, Argentina, to perform the song live for the very first time on stage during Coldplay's massive, globally broadcasted Music of the Spheres stadium tour. The atmosphere inside that legendary stadium was thick with an electric, tear-inducing energy as Chris Martin passionately introduced Jin to a crowd of over 70,000 rock fans, not as a guest pop star, but as his beloved brother and an equal artist who deserved the grandest stage on earth. As Jin belted out the emotional high notes, his voice echoing beautifully against the night sky, Chris Martin stood right beside him, playing the guitar, beaming with a proud, paternal smile, and shouting his praises for the entire world to hear. by publicly embracing Jin on a historic rock stage, gifting him his personal musical instrument, and treating his artistic departure with the gravity of a legendary send-off. Chris Martin and Coldplay single-handedly demolished the elitist gatekeeping that often plagues the rock community, proving to the world that Jin's emotional depth, his vocal artistry, and his genuine soul had earned the highest form of undisputed validation from one of the greatest stadium acts in modern musical history.
Number 4. Jungkook, the king of R&B's ultimate cosign, when the pop prince inherited the dance floor throne. To truly comprehend the sheer monumental magnitude of what it means to be officially crowned by American R&B royalty, you have to wind the clock back and picture a fiercely determined, starry-eyed 15-year-old boy arriving in the bustling, unforgiving city of Seoul with nothing but a raw, unpolished voice and a desperate hunger to conquer the stage, spending thousands of sleepless, grueling hours in a tiny, sweat-drenched dance studio, obsessively mirroring the fluid, gravity-defying grooves of Western pop icons until his body physically ached. For Jungkook, the legendary golden maknae of BTS, the ultimate blueprint for the perfect all-around entertainer, was never built on manufactured idol formulas, but rather on the untouchable, electrifying legacies of American musical titans like Michael Jackson, and most notably, the undisputed contemporary king of R&B himself, Usher Raymond IV. You have to understand that in the ruthless, hyper-competitive ecosystem of the American music industry, Usher is not just a highly successful singer, he is an absolute cultural institution, a diamond-certified 8-time Grammy-winning phenomenon whose historic, culture-shifting album Confessions fundamentally rewired the entire DNA of modern pop, soul, and hip-hop, establishing him as the ultimate fiercely protective gatekeeper of authentic stage presence and spectacular choreography. Usher represents a glorious golden era of performance art where you couldn't just rely on studio magic or flashy background dancers. You actually had to possess the holy trinity of perfect pitch, ridiculous footwork, and a magnetic, undeniable swagger that could captivate a stadium of 100,000 people in a single breath. Therefore, when Jungkook boldly launched his global solo domination era with his spectacular debut album Golden, aiming his artistic crosshairs directly at the nostalgic, funky, brass-heavy sounds of classic 2000s American pop and R&B, the entire Western music establishment watched with bated breath, quietly wondering if this young, skyrocketing Korean superstar could genuinely carry the immense, suffocating weight of that specific, culturally sacred musical heritage without looking like a mere imitation. The jaw-dropping, earth-shattering answer arrived in the form of the historic Standing Next to You remix, a masterstroke collaborative project that completely obliterated the outdated, condescending illusion that Western legends view K-pop merely as a passing, manufactured bubblegum trend, because Usher didn't just casually phone in a buttery vocal verse for a quick, effortless paycheck. He brought the two generational powerhouses face to face on the exact same physical dance floor for a visual spectacle that left the global music community utterly speechless. The behind-the-scenes reality of this cinematic collaboration is absolutely dripping with profound, spine-tingling mutual respect, highlighted by the mind-blowing fact that Usher, a man who was literally in the middle of preparing for the biggest, most high-pressure stage of his entire life at the Super Bowl halftime show, enthusiastically took the time to fly out and meticulously learn the intricate, explosive Michael Jackson-inspired choreography right alongside Jungkook. Picture the goosebump-inducing, heavily atmospheric visual of these two distinct eras of musical greatness colliding perfectly in a sleek industrial warehouse setting, their bodies moving in absolute terrifying synchronization, effortlessly executing buttery smooth glides, lightning-fast isolations, and that signature laid-back Usher bounce with a flawless, intimidating swagger that simply cannot be faked, manufactured, or bought in a recording studio. During their deeply emotional interactions on set, Usher was visibly taken aback by Jungkook's raw, unadulterated talent, completely dropping the typical senior-junior industry hierarchy to actively treat the BTS vocalist as a true, undisputed peer, a lyrical and physical equal who possessed the exact same relentless, psychotic perfectionism and burning fire that defined Usher's own meteoric rise to superstardom back in the late 90s.
The validation reached an absolute fever pitch when the two artists broke the internet by casually posting a TikTok dance challenge to Usher's iconic club-shaking anthem, Yeah, a deeply symbolic, joy-filled moment that seamlessly bridged the gap between the dominant 2000s Atlanta R&B scene and the modern 2020s K-pop explosion, proving to the most stubborn American purists that Jungkook's groove was undeniably authentic. This was not merely a highly successful pop collaboration designed to climb the Billboard charts. It was a sacred, almost spiritual coronation, a literal passing of the heavy, jewel-encrusted torch from the man who defined a generation of American R&B to the young, fearless Korean prodigy who is currently rewriting the rules of the global pop landscape with his bare hands. For Jungkook, a boy who grew up obsessively dissecting Usher's Caught Up and You Got It Bad music videos on a tiny, cracked smartphone screen, having the actual living legend stand shoulder to shoulder with him, flawlessly mirroring his intensely difficult choreography and proudly declaring his immense respect to the entire world, represents the absolute, untouchable pinnacle of artistic validation. It emphatically destroyed the racist, elitist stereotypes that Asian artists cannot authentically master and embody Western grooves, proving once and for all that true generational talent instantly recognizes its own reflection across oceans, transcending language barriers, cultural borders, and passing decades, leaving hardcore fans completely hypnotized and cynical critics permanently silenced by the undeniable historic reality that Jungkook has officially inherited the pop R&B throne from the very American legends who inspired him to dream in the first place.
Number 3. Kim Tae-young, the jazz maestro's soulmate, when a Grammy titan bowed to the baritone prince. To truly understand the astonishing, almost cinematic magic of Kim Tae-young's seamless infiltration into the fiercely traditional, heavily guarded pantheon of American jazz and classic soul, you have to completely erase the image of the shiny, synchronized K-pop idol and instead picture a deeply old soul trapped inside the body of a modern global superstar. A young boy from rural Daegu who spent his formative years not just listening to trendy radio hits, but obsessively blowing into a brass saxophone until his lungs burned, entirely captivated by the smoky, scratchy, vinyl-soaked voices of legendary mid-century titans like Frank Sinatra, Louis Armstrong, and Sammy Davis Jr., dreaming of a bygone era of music that most people his age had completely forgotten or abandoned. For V, whose astonishingly deep, velvety, and impossibly rich baritone voice naturally and completely defied the standard, high-pitched, auto-tuned tenor vocals heavily favored by the ruthless modern pop industry machine, his love for authentic jazz, blues, and neo-soul was never a manufactured aesthetic crafted by corporate executives for a quick solo concept, but rather an integral, bleeding piece of his core identity, a profound musical philosophy that he carried with him as BTS conquered the loudest, most chaotic stadiums across the globe. But how does a South Korean artist who built his empire on explosive hip-hop performances and razor-sharp pop choreography actually prove to the cynical, notoriously elitist gatekeepers of pure American musical heritage that his jazz sensibilities are genuine, rooted in deep study, and not just a superficial aesthetic costume? The jaw-dropping, undisputed answer to that monumental question materialized in the most spectacular, high-stakes environment imaginable, the 2022 Grammy Awards in Las Vegas, the absolute holy grail of the Western music industry, where the true heavyweights of global artistry gathered to silently judge the authenticity and longevity of their peers. Enter Jon Batiste, an undisputed, larger-than-life American music icon, a brilliant Juilliard-trained virtuoso, an Academy Award-winning composer, and a multi-Grammy-winning titan who literally carries the sacred ancestral bloodline of New Orleans jazz and American roots music in his veins. A man who reigned absolute supreme that exact night by sweeping the Ultimate Album of the Year award away from the biggest mainstream pop stars on the planet. Days before the historic ceremony even began, the internet was completely set ablaze when Jon Batiste, a musical purist who rarely engages with fleeting pop trends, took to social media to explicitly and passionately declare his desire to meet Tae-young, revealing that he had been closely observing V's incredible stage presence, his impeccable vintage fashion, and most importantly, his deep, undeniable understanding of groove, rhythm, and classical jazz phrasing.
When the universe finally collided and the two artists met on that chaotic Grammy night, the interaction completely shattered the standard superficial, PR-driven photo ops that usually define award shows, because Jean-Baptiste didn't look at V as just another screaming heartthrob from a foreign boy band. He looked at him with the burning intensity and warm recognition of a fellow musician who instantly recognizes a kindred spirit, leading to a viral, unforgettable moment where the two men were seen passionately discussing music, laughing out loud, and even spontaneously dining together later to talk about pure instrumentation and jazz history, an interaction that Batiste proudly shared with the world, openly declaring his deep love and respect for V's authentic artistry. But the universe wasn't finished validating the baritone prince that night, because during that very same historic evening, V gathered the immense, terrifying courage to approach another absolute titan of American music, the legendary Lady Gaga, a pop mastermind who had famously spent years studying and recording with the late great Tony Bennett to become a fiercely respected jazz vocalist in her own right. The moment V gently approached her table and respectfully conveyed how deeply her jazz performances had inspired his own artistic journey, Lady Gaga didn't just offer a polite, dismissive nod. Instead, she stood up, grabbed his hands with genuine warmth, warmly kissed him on the cheek, and looked into his eyes with absolute, validating sincerity, creating a beautiful, internet-breaking photograph that spoke 1,000 words about mutual artistic reverence. For a kid who used to practice his saxophone in the quiet, echoing corners of his middle school, desperately trying to emulate the complex improvisations of American jazz legends, having the reigning king of the Grammys actively seek him out for a musical brotherhood, and having a universally revered pop jazz queen embrace him with such profound, undeniable respect represents a historic, untouchable triumph that goes far beyond any Billboard chart or streaming record. It emphatically proved to the entire world that V's soulful baritone, his meticulous study of vintage genres, and his genuine, bleeding heart for classic American music had officially earned him a permanent, highly respected seat at the table of musical royalty, proving that true artistry requires no translation, eliminating the cultural barriers of the industry, and leaving the global audience completely mesmerized by how a South Korean superstar managed to single-handedly revive the romantic, classy, and utterly timeless spirit of classic jazz right in front of the very American legends who actively guard its sacred legacy.
Number 2. Jimin, the R&B icon's serenade, when the 90s legends bowed to the Black Swan. To genuinely comprehend the sheer, breathtaking rarity of Park Jimin's vocal and artistic validation by the absolute titans of American rhythm and blues, you have to first deeply understand the grueling, hypercritical environment of the global music industry, where vocalists are constantly judged by rigid, outdated standards of power belting and traditional masculinity, leaving very little room for those who dare to color outside the lines of conventional pop. Imagine a relentlessly hard-working, naturally gifted contemporary dancer from the coastal city of Busan, a young man possessing a staggeringly unique, breathtakingly androgynous, and razor-sharp countertenor voice that sounds less like a standard pop instrument and more like the delicate, piercingly beautiful cry of a mythical creature, a vocal tone so incredibly distinct that it immediately divides casual listeners but completely hypnotizes those with a refined, educated ear for genuine, raw emotion. For years, Jimin battled the agonizing internal insecurities regarding his own vocal technique, constantly pushing his body and his vocal cords to the absolute breaking point in the claustrophobic practice rooms of Seoul, desperately trying to prove that his ethereal, breathy register and emotionally devastating delivery could hold its own on the world's biggest stages, alongside the most legendary, earth-shattering voices in the history of modern music. But how does a South Korean idol, armed with a delicate, fairy-like vocal texture and singing almost entirely in his native language, manage to pierce straight through the impenetrable, fiercely guarded armor of the American rhythm and blues establishment, a sacred musical genre fundamentally built on the rich, historically profound foundations of Black American soul, powerful church choirs, and unparalleled vocal acrobatics?
The earth-shattering, tear-inducing answer arrived from the absolute highest possible mountain peak of R&B royalty, stemming directly from a man whose legendary group literally wrote the definitive textbook on vocal harmony and emotional delivery in the 1990s, the undisputed four-time Grammy-winning powerhouse Boyz II Men. When you talk about the absolute golden era of American R&B, Boyz II Men is not just a successful group, they are an untouchable god-tier cultural institution, holding historic, record-breaking Billboard runs with monumental, generation-defining anthems like End of the Road and One Sweet Day, establishing themselves as the ultimate, unforgiving benchmark for any singer on the planet who dares to step in front of a microphone to attempt a vocal run. Therefore, the global music community was left absolutely paralyzed in a state of sheer, unadulterated shock when Sean Stockman, the legendary tenor of Boyz II Men, accidentally stumbled upon Jimin's deeply hypnotic, starry-eyed solo masterpiece, Serendipity, and completely fell down an obsessive, inescapable rabbit hole of pure musical admiration. Stockman didn't just offer a fleeting, superficial compliment in a random PR-managed interview or post a quick, meaningless tweet. He experienced a profound, visceral reaction to the sheer, angelic purity of Jimin's voice, a voice that miraculously transcended every conceivable barrier of language, culture, and geographic borders. In an unprecedented, deeply humbling move that left hardcore R&B purists utterly speechless, this legendary American vocal architect actually sat down in his personal studio, pulled out his acoustic guitar, meticulously studied the complex phonetic nuances of the Korean language, and recorded a stunningly soulful, breathtakingly beautiful acoustic cover of Serendipity, singing the Korean lyrics with such genuine passion and tender respect that it instantly went viral across the globe. Stockman openly and passionately praised Jimin on massive public platforms, fiercely defending the artistic integrity of BTS against cynical Western critics, and marveling at Jimin's extraordinary ability to convey such profound, agonizingly beautiful emotion without the listener needing to understand a single word of Korean, an ultimate testament to the universal, piercing power of his vocal delivery. But the legendary R&B validation did not simply end with the veteran architects of the 90s, because right around the exact same era, the modern, multi-platinum selling prince of contemporary American R&B, Khalid, loudly and unapologetically declared his own massive, fanboy-level obsession with Jimin and that exact same solo track. Khalid, whose own beautifully raspy, soulful voice has dominated global charts for years, was literally spotted in the front row of the massive Rose Bowl Stadium, completely losing his mind, enthusiastically screaming the lyrics and swaying his arms with pure, unadulterated joy the moment Jimin descended onto the stage inside his iconic, transparent bubble to perform the breathtaking choreography of Serendipity. To see the undisputed pioneers of classic vocal harmony and the reigning champions of modern soulful pop actively and proudly bowing down to the mesmerizing, velvet-like vocal texture of a South Korean dancer is an astronomical, paradigm-shifting phenomenon that violently shatters every preconceived notion of Western musical elitism. It proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that Park Jimin is not just a visual center or a spectacular lead dancer in a massive boy band, but rather a profoundly gifted, once-in-a-generation vocal artist whose unique, emotionally devastating voice possesses the rare, undeniable magic to completely disarm, captivate, and earn the deepest, most genuine artistic respect from the very American legends who built the entire foundation of the rhythm and blues genre. Can you even begin to imagine the overwhelming, heart-stopping pride Jimin must have felt knowing that the very voices that defined global soul music were quietly sitting in their studios, practicing his Korean lyrics and recognizing his delicate, powerful grace as the absolute pinnacle of modern artistic perfection?
Number 1. Suga, the genius producer's crown, when the American elites surrendered to the Daegu maestro. To truly comprehend the absolute jaw-dropping magnitude of Min Yoon-gi's ascension into the highly exclusive, fiercely protected ranks of the global production elite, you have to completely rewind the tape and step back into the damp, freezing, and claustrophobic underground studios of Daegu, where a deeply introverted, fiercely independent teenager was desperately trying to survive by selling his self-made hip-hop beats just to afford a single bowl of cheap street noodles for dinner. This is the incredibly raw, heartbreaking origin story of the man the world now reveres as Suga and his razor-sharp, uncompromising alter ego, Auguste D, a musical genius who literally shattered his own shoulder working as a motorcycle delivery boy just to pay his tuition, all while silently battling crippling mental health, social anxiety, and the suffocating pressure of a society that constantly told him his music would only lead to starvation and failure. For years within the grueling South Korean idol industry, Yoon-gi had to constantly fight a brutal, exhausting war on two entirely different fronts, defending his authentic, bleeding hip-hop roots against purist underground Korean rappers who falsely labeled him a corporate sellout, while simultaneously having to prove to cynical, gatekeeping Western critics that a member of a highly synchronized boy band could actually possess the brilliant, strategic, and profoundly philosophical mind of a master record producer. But how exactly does a completely self-taught Korean beatmaker who originally built his empire on a cheap, cracked MIDI keyboard actually manage to command the deepest, most genuine artistic respect from the absolute heavyweights of the American music industry, effortlessly bypassing all the legendary multi-Grammy-winning Los Angeles hitmakers to become the most sought-after musical architect on the planet? The earth-shattering historic turning point that left the entire global music community absolutely paralyzed in a state of sheer awe unfolded during the intimate creation of the critically acclaimed, deeply autobiographical album Manic by the multi-platinum American pop alternative icon and undeniable voice of her generation, Halsey. When Halsey was actively seeking a collaborator to help her articulate the darkest, most vulnerable, and chaotic corners of her own psyche, she completely ignored the typical, predictable Rolodex of legendary Western producers that her massive label threw at her. Instead, she obsessively studied Yoon-gi's incredibly raw, unfiltered Auguste D mixtape, becoming completely captivated by his fearless ability to rap so openly and aggressively about his own mental health, his internal demons, and the terrifying, suffocating shadow of monumental success. In an unprecedented, monumental move that permanently altered the landscape of Western pop music and shattered invisible industry ceilings, Halsey didn't just casually ask for a generic radio-friendly pop feature. She specifically requested Yoon-gi to entirely produce a haunting, atmospheric interlude for her album, officially and proudly titling the track Suga's Interlude, a jaw-dropping gesture of immense artistic respect that permanently stamped a Korean producer's name directly into the track list of a massive mainstream American record. Yoon-gi didn't compromise a single ounce of his artistic integrity for this historic American crossover. He meticulously layered the track with melancholic, heartbreaking piano chords, entirely wrote and delivered his intensely emotional verses in his native Korean language, and poured out his soul about the agonizing duality of chasing your wildest dreams while slowly losing your own humanity in the process, prompting Halsey to publicly, loudly, and fiercely defend his genius, explicitly declaring to the American media that Min Yoon-gi possesses one of the most brilliant, philosophical, and introspective minds in the entire global music industry today. But this profound, awe-inspiring validation from the American elite didn't just stop with the alternative pop realm. It violently shattered the heavy iron gates of the fiercely guarded American hip-hop scene in the most tragic, deeply emotional, and legendary way imaginable, involving the late monumental emo rap icon Juice WRLD.
Juice WRLD was widely regarded by the entire industry as a generational prodigy, an untouchable freestyle genius who completely redefined modern American hip-hop by fusing it with raw, bleeding, rock-infused emotional vulnerability, an artist who was universally respected by every single veteran gatekeeper in the Western rap game. Before his devastating, incredibly untimely passing, Juice WRLD and Yoongi had genuinely connected over their shared, painful understanding of mental health struggles, toxic industry pressures, and the incredibly heavy burden of being the designated voice for a broken, anxious generation. Therefore, when Juice WRLD's estate and deeply protective family were meticulously curating his highly anticipated posthumous album, Fighting Demons, an incredibly sacred project that legendary American rappers were literally begging to be a part of, they explicitly reached out and specifically chose Yoongi to feature on the track Girl of My Dreams. This was absolutely not some manufactured, soulless corporate collaboration orchestrated by greedy label executives looking for streaming numbers. This was a deeply profound spiritual passing of the torch, an undeniable testament to the fact that the people closest to the legendary American rapper knew for a fact that he possessed an immense brotherly respect for Yoongi's lyrical authenticity and production mastery. When the track officially dropped, Yoongi once again delivered a devastatingly beautiful, poetic Korean verse that perfectly complemented Juice WRLD's raw, agonizing vocals, resulting in the song debuting at the absolute top of the global Billboard charts, proving to the entire world that his pen game and his emotional resonance transcend every conceivable boundary of spoken language, geographic culture, and musical genre. To look back and see an underground, starving beatmaker from the rainy streets of Daegu, who once literally had to choose between taking the public bus home or eating a cheap meal, miraculously evolve into a universally revered, completely untouchable maestro who is actively sought out, deeply respected, and publicly crowned by the reigning titans of American pop and the legendary prodigies of modern hip-hop, is an incredibly inspiring cinematic triumph that completely obliterates the outdated elitist notion that K-pop artists are merely manufactured corporate products. It cements once and for all the undisputed historical and awe-inspiring fact that Min Yoon-gi is not just a temporary participant in the global music industry, but a masterful, legendary architect who is currently reshaping its very foundation with his bare hands, leaving millions of hardcore fans utterly mesmerized and the most cynical Western critics permanently silenced by his undeniable, untouchable genius.
To look back at this breathtaking, historic journey and truly digest the sheer, monumental magnitude of these 7 unbelievable milestones is to witness the very rewriting of global music history right before our own eyes, completely shattering everything we thought we knew about the impenetrable fortress of the Western entertainment industry. We started this narrative by asking what it genuinely takes to earn the deep, undeniable respect of true American music legends, and the earth-shattering answer is now echoing loudly across sold-out stadiums, intimate recording studios, and historic award stages all over the world. It takes an uncompromising, almost terrifying dedication to the pure, unadulterated soul of the musical craft. When you take a step back and closely examine the entire jaw-dropping tapestry of these interactions, from RM dissecting the heavy, philosophical depths of hip-hop with the undisputed neo-soul queen Erykah Badu, to J-Hope exchanging legendary, deeply emotional lyrical bars on the gritty, historic streets of New York City with his ultimate childhood idol J. Cole, to Jin receiving the ultimate tear-inducing passing of the stadium rock and roll torch directly from the hands of Coldplay's Chris Martin, to Jungkook flawlessly matching the terrifying, god-tier swagger of Usher on an industrial warehouse dance floor, to V locking eyes with Jon Batiste in Lady Gaga as an undisputed, highly respected equal in the sacred vintage realm of classical jazz, to Jimin having his delicate, heavenly vocal texture meticulously studied and passionately covered by the legendary architects of 90s R&B, Boyz II Men, And finally, to Suga being officially crowned as the absolute untouchable mastermind producer by both Halsey and the fiercely protective hip-hop royalty surrounding the late Juice WRLD. You instantly realize that this phenomenon is infinitely bigger than just a few successful, high-budget international pop collaborations designed to artificially boost Billboard's streaming metrics. This is the ultimate, highly cinematic and glorious destruction of the invisible, heavy, and often deeply prejudiced iron walls that have historically separated Western music royalty from Eastern artists. For decades, the cynical, fiercely guarded American music establishment desperately tried to push the arrogant, condescending narrative that K-pop was nothing more than a superficial, manufactured corporate factory of pretty faces, perfectly synchronized robotic dancing, and empty, meaningless lyrics designed solely to manipulate screaming teenagers and generate quick, disposable revenue. But these 7 boys from South Korea, who started their agonizing, heartbreaking journey in a cramped, leaky dormitory on the brink of absolute financial bankruptcy, literally handing out free concert flyers on the hot, unforgiving sidewalks of Los Angeles while aggressively begging random strangers just to listen to their music, entirely refused to be boxed into that demeaning, restrictive stereotype. Instead of aggressively changing their core identities, completely abandoning their native language, or selling out their creative souls to cheaply pander to the lucrative Western market, they chose the absolute hardest, most grueling, and terrifying path possible. They fiercely doubled down on their raw, unfiltered authenticity. They poured their bleeding hearts, their grueling physical pain, their exhausted tears, and their darkest mental struggles into their intricate lyricism, and they essentially forced the absolute biggest, most intimidating and legendary musical titans in the history of the world to stop exactly what they were doing, sit down, and genuinely listen to the stories of Korean youth. And the jaw-dropping, world-changing result? The undisputed multi-Grammy-winning legends of American hip-hop, rock, R&B, pop, and jazz didn't just politely listen, they aggressively stood up, they bowed down with profound mutual respect, they handed over their personal, sacred instruments, they generously shared their historic, record-breaking stages, and they openly, proudly, and loudly welcomed BTS into the highly exclusive, fiercely heavily guarded brotherhood of true, undeniable global artistry. This is the ultimate, undisputed proof that authentic, bleeding heart music possesses a magical, deeply transcendent power that absolutely and violently shatters every single conceivable barrier of spoken language, geographic borders, deeply rooted racial prejudices, and passing generations. When true, once-in-a-lifetime, generational artistic genius speaks its truth, the entire universe instantly recognizes the frequency, no matter where it comes from, what skin color it has, or what native tongue it uses to deliver the message. BTS didn't just temporarily break into the notoriously elitist American music industry. They completely conquered its heart, healed a massive cultural divide, and built an immortal, awe-inspiring, and completely bulletproof legacy that will be fiercely studied, passionately celebrated, and universally revered by future generations of aspiring artists for centuries to come, forever cementing their righteous, incredibly hard-earned thrones, not just as the biggest, most successful boy band in the history of human civilization, but as absolute, undisputed, and globally worshipped musical legends in their own glorious, untouchable right.